Hello, friends. Did you know that nearly 80% of those who watch my videos aren't subscribed? If you enjoy the content, I'd truly appreciate it if you hit that subscribe button. It helps a lot. Also, don't forget to leave a like and share your thoughts in the comments. Your interaction not only supports the channel's growth, but also helps these stories reach more people. Thank you all for being here. By the way, where are you watching from? Let me know in the comments. The wind had been building for 3 days straight, and now it sounded like something alive trying to tear the platform apart. I stood on the main deck watching the swells roll in from the southwest, each one bigger than the last, and I knew the supply boat wasn't coming. Not today. Probably not tomorrow either. Boyd Fenwick had called it 2 days ago. "Asa," he'd said over the radio, his voice crackling with static. "They're saying another week, maybe more." He was our supervisor, been working platforms in the Gulf for 20 years, and if Boyd said the weather was bad enough to keep the boats away, you believed him. The helicopter had come yesterday, taken most of the crew off before the worst of it hit. Standard procedure when a storm stacks up like this: get the non-essential personnel to shore, leave a skeleton crew to keep the generators running and make sure nothing breaks loose. They'd asked for volunteers to stay. I'd raised my hand. The overtime pay was good, and I'd been through storms before. Besides, my ex-wife had the kids this month anyway. Nowhere I needed to be. So now it was just 3 of us out here on platform Delta 7. Me, Boyd up in the supervisor's quarters, and Tamsin Keeler in the radio room. 48 hours minimum before anyone could get back out to us, probably longer. The rig could run itself mostly, but somebody needed to be here in case something went wrong. That's what they paid us for. I finished my deck inspection as the lights started to fade. Everything was secure. Hatches dogged down, loose equipment stowed, safety lines checked and double-checked. The wind was steady now at 40 knots, gusting higher, and the salt spray was coming over the rail in sheets. I could taste it in my mouth, feel it stinging my eyes. The platform groaned and shifted under my feet, that deep metallic sound you never quite get used to, like the whole structure was complaining about the weight of the ocean trying to pull it down. Back inside, I stripped off my rain gear and headed for the galley. The fluorescent lights flickered as I walked through the corridors, something they did sometimes when the generators cycled. Everything echoed in the empty platform. My footsteps, the bang of a door somewhere below, the constant hum of machinery. With 15 men aboard, you didn't notice these sounds. With 3, the place felt hollow, like walking through a building that had been abandoned in a hurry. I made coffee and sat in the galley watching the storm through the windows. The sky was the color of old bruises, purple and gray, and the sea was running in long, confused swells that hit the platform legs from different directions. We were 200 miles offshore, nothing but water in every direction until you hit Louisiana. On clear days, you could see forever out here. Tonight, visibility was maybe 100 yards before everything disappeared into spray and darkness. Boyd came in around 8, poured himself coffee, and sat across from me. He looked tired, the kind of tired that comes from too many years of this work, too many storms, too many close calls. "Tamsin says the weather's going to get worse before it gets better," he said. "Another front coming in behind this one. How long? Week. Maybe 10 days total." He drank his coffee and stared out at the storm. "I've been doing this since I was 23 years old, Asa. Never been stranded out here this long." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just nodded. Boyd wasn't the type to complain, and if he was worried, that meant something. We sat in silence for a while, listening to the wind scream around the platform superstructure, listening to the groan and creak of metal under stress. "You should get some sleep," Boyd finally said. "I'll take first watch, make sure nothing shakes loose, You can relieve me at midnight." I finished my coffee and headed to my bunk. The crew quarters were on the lower level, below the main deck, but above the water line. My cabin was small, just a bed, a locker, and a tiny desk bolted to the floor. The porthole showed nothing but darkness and occasional spray. I lay down fully clothed, knowing I probably wouldn't sleep much, but wanting to rest while I could. That's when I heard it for the first time. A sound that didn't belong, filtering through the general noise of the storm and the platform. It was faint, almost lost in all the other sounds, but distinct enough that I noticed it. A rhythmic scraping, like metal dragging across metal, coming from somewhere below. I sat up and listened. The sound came and went, irregular but persistent. Probably just something that had worked loose despite our checks, maybe a piece of equipment shifting in its housing. I should go check it, I thought. But exhaustion was pulling at me, and Boyd was on watch. If it was serious, he'd hear it too. I lay back down and closed my eyes. Sleep came in fragments. I'd drift off for a few minutes, then wake to the sound of the storm or the platform's groaning, then drift off again. Somewhere in one of those fragments, I dreamed I was walking through the platform corridors and all the lights were off, except for the emergency lighting. Those dim red bulbs that cast everything in a hellish glow. In the dream, I could hear footsteps behind me, matching my pace exactly, but every time I turned around there was nothing there. I woke at 11:45, 15 minutes before my watch. The scraping sound had stopped, or maybe I just couldn't hear it anymore over the storm. I splashed water on my face and headed up to relieve Boyd. The supervisor's station was in the control room, a space filled with monitors and gauges that tracked every system on the platform. Boyd was standing in front of the closed-circuit security screens when I came in, his back to me, not moving, just staring at the monitors. "Boyd?" He turned slowly, and his face looked strange in the light from the screens, pale, almost gray. "Asa, yeah, your watch." His voice sounded distant, like he was somewhere else in his head. "You okay?" "Fine, just tired." He moved past me toward the door, then stopped. "The camera on the lower deck, number 7. Take a look at it when you get a chance." "What's wrong with it?" "Just look at it." Then he was gone, his footsteps fading down the corridor. I turned to the monitors. There were 12 cameras positioned around the platform, covering all the main deck areas, the equipment zones, the loading dock. Number 7 showed the lower deck on the north side, an area we used for storage and maintenance. The image was grainy, the way security cameras always are, showing stacked equipment and spare parts secured under tarps. I watched it for a minute, seeing nothing unusual, just an empty deck being hit by spray every time a wave came over the rail. I was about to look away when I saw it. A shadow just at the edge of the frame, moving in a way that didn't match the motion of anything else in the shot. I leaned closer to the screen. The shadow appeared again, longer this time, stretching across the deck like something tall was standing just out of frame. But there was nothing there that should cast a shadow like that. The lighting on the lower deck came from overhead floods, fixed positions that didn't move. Shadows shouldn't be moving at all unless something was passing in front of the lights. I switched to camera 8, which covered an adjacent area. Nothing unusual. Switched back to 7. The shadow was gone. Just the empty deck, the tarps snapping in the wind, the spray coming over the rail. I told myself it was a trick of the light, maybe something reflecting off the wet metal in a strange way. Cameras did weird things sometimes, especially in storms. I made a note in the log to check that deck in the morning, then settled into the watch routine, checking gauges, monitoring systems, making rounds of the important equipment every hour. At 2 a.m, the radio crackled to life. Just static at first, the kind of atmospheric interference you get in heavy weather. Then, cutting through the static, a voice. Male, saying something I couldn't quite make out. I adjusted the frequency, trying to clear up the signal. The voice came again, clearer this time. Platform Delta 7, do you copy? I grabbed the microphone. This is Delta 7, go ahead. Static, then the voice again, but not responding to me, just repeating. Platform Delta 7, do you copy? Platform Delta 7. It was a loop, a recording playing over and over, bleeding through on our frequency from somewhere. Probably another platform or a ship, their transmission getting bounced around by the weather. It happens sometimes. I tried calling back anyway, identifying our position and asking for their location, but there was no response. Just that same phrase, repeating every 30 seconds or so. I logged it and kept monitoring. The voice continued for about 20 minutes, then faded out. I was alone again with the storm and the creaking platform. At 4 a.m, I made my rounds. The corridors were dim, lit only by the emergency lighting since we were running on minimal power to conserve fuel. I checked the generator room first. Everything running normally, fuel levels good. Then the equipment deck, where all the major machinery was housed. Everything secured, no problems. I was heading back to the control room when I passed the closed-circuit camera for the lower deck, mounted on the wall at a corridor junction. I stopped and looked down the corridor in the direction the camera was pointing. From here, I could just see the edge of the lower deck through a doorway. There was someone standing there. I could see them clearly. A dark figure in the doorway, backlit by the deck lights. Tall, wearing what looked like a rain slicker, standing completely still despite the wind and spray. My heart jumped. "Hey!" I called out, my voice echoing in the corridor. "Boyd? Tamsin?" The figure didn't move, didn't respond, just stood there. I started toward the doorway, moving quickly now, my hand going to the radio on my belt. "Boyd, you on the lower deck?" No response. The radio crackled with static, but no voice came back. I reached the doorway and looked out. The lower deck was empty. Nothing but equipment and tarps, and the spray coming over the rail. No one standing there, no rain slicker, no figure. Just empty deck stretching away into the darkness. I stood there for a long moment, my breath coming faster than it should, telling myself I'd seen a shadow, a trick of the lighting, something my tired brain had misinterpreted. But I knew what I'd seen. Someone had been standing there. I keyed my radio again. "Boyd, Tamsin, either of you awake?" This time, Boyd's voice came back, thick with sleep. "What's wrong? You been out of your quarters in the last few minutes?" "No." "Been asleep. What's going on?" "Nothing. Never mind. Go back to sleep." I went back to the control room and pulled up camera 7 again. The lower deck looked exactly as it had before, empty, spray-soaked. Nothing moving except the tarps in the wind. I watched it for 10 minutes, seeing nothing unusual. But then, just as I was about to look away, I saw the shadow again. Long and dark, stretching across the deck from just outside the camera's frame. It moved slowly, deliberately, like someone was walking just out of view. The shadow reached across the entire deck, impossibly long for the angle of the lights, then slowly withdrew and disappeared. I checked every other camera. All of them showed empty decks, empty corridors, no movement anywhere. Just the storm and the platform riding it out. At 6 a.m, as gray light started to filter through the clouds, Boyd came to relieve me. He looked like he hadn't slept well. "Anything happen?" I almost told him about the figure in the doorway, about the shadow on camera 7. But in the morning light, with Boyd standing there looking tired and worried, it seemed ridiculous. "Radio interference," I said. "Some kind of loop transmission. and I thought I saw something on the lower deck, but it was just shadows. Boyd nodded slowly. The lower deck, yeah. He didn't elaborate, just moved to the monitors and started checking the overnight logs. I went to get breakfast. Tamsin was already in the galley, eating cereal and reading a paperback. She looked up when I came in. Morning, Asa. Storm's supposed to break tomorrow. That's good news. I poured coffee and sat down. You been in the radio room all night? Most of it. Why? You pick up any strange transmissions? Like a loop? Someone calling our platform designation? She frowned. No. When did you hear it? Around 2. Lasted maybe 20 minutes. I didn't hear anything, but I was running diagnostics on the satellite link around then, had my headphones off. She marked her page and closed the book. What did it say? Just called our platform, asked if we copy. Over and over. Tamsin was quiet for a moment. You know what platform this is, right? Delta 7. What it used to be called before they redesignated it. I didn't know. I'd only been working the Gulf for 2 years, and I'd never thought to ask about the history. They called it the North Star Platform, Tamsin said. Back in the 80s. There was an accident. Blowout during drilling operations. 3 men died before they got it under control. She paused, stirring her cereal without eating it. One of them was the radio operator. They say he was trying to call for help when the fire reached the radio room. I felt cold despite the warm coffee. They say, I've heard stories. Probably bullshit, you know how people talk. But some of the old-timers won't work this platform. Say it's unlucky. You believe that? She shrugged. I believe accidents happen and people die. And sometimes we tell stories to make sense of it. Whether there's anything more to it than that. She trailed off, looking out the window at the storm. I've worked here 2 years and never seen anything I couldn't explain. I wanted to ask her about the shadow, about the figure in the doorway, but the morning light was getting stronger, and the whole thing seemed less real now, less immediate. Probably just fatigue and stress, my mind playing tricks after too many hours awake. I finished my coffee and went to my bunk to sleep. The storm was still raging outside, the platform still groaning under the stress, but exhaustion was stronger than unease. I fell asleep almost immediately. I woke to someone shaking my shoulder. Boyd was standing over me, his face tight with concern. Asa, we've got a problem. I sat up, checking my watch. Only been asleep for 3 hours. What's wrong? The lower deck. Something's opened one of the storage lockers. Tools all over the deck. I followed him up and out to the lower deck. The wind hit us as soon as we stepped outside, but it had decreased from the night before. Still rough, but manageable. Boyd led me to the north side, where Camera 7 was positioned. A storage locker had been opened, its door hanging on bent hinges. Tools were scattered across the deck. Wrenches, hammers, pry bars. The locker had been secured with a padlock that was now lying on the deck. Still locked, the hasp torn out of the door. Storm surge? I suggested, though I knew it didn't make sense. We were well above the water line. Hasps torn from the inside, Boyd said, pointing. He was right. The metal was bent outward, like something had pushed from inside the locker. And look at this. He pointed to the deck near the scattered tools. In the salt spray and condensation there were marks. Not quite footprints, but impressions in the moisture, leading from the locker to the rail and then stopping. I knelt down to look closer. The marks were roughly shoe-sized, but the pattern was wrong, like someone had been walking with a strange gait, their feet turned at odd angles. The impressions led right to the rail and then just ended, as if whoever made them had stepped over and into the sea. "Could be from before the storm," I said, not believing it myself. "Somebody opened the locker, got some tools, we didn't notice. Maybe." Boyd didn't sound convinced. He straightened up and looked around the deck. "Help me clean this up. Don't want anything loose when the next front comes through." We gathered the tools and secured them in another locker, this one with a bolt that couldn't be torn out. The whole time I was aware of the camera mounted above us, recording everything. I found myself glancing up at it, wondering what it had captured during the night. Back in the control room, I asked Boyd if I could review the overnight footage from camera 7. He gave me a look that said he'd been expecting the question. "Already did. 3 hours ago, around 0400, the camera just stops, goes to static for about 2 minutes, then comes back. When it comes back, the locker's open and the tools are on the deck. Power surge? No record of it. Everything else stayed on." We stood there looking at the monitor, watching the empty deck in real time. "What do you think happened?" I finally asked. Boyd was quiet for a long moment. "I think we're stuck out here for another week with something I don't understand, and I think we need to be very careful." That night I took the watch again. Boyd had wanted to do it, but I insisted. Part of me wanted to see if anything else would happen. Wanted to prove to myself that there was a rational explanation for all of it. The radio loop started at exactly 2 in the morning. The same voice, the same words. "Platform Delta 7, do you copy?" Over and over, crackling through the static. This time, I recorded it. Grabbed the portable recorder we kept for logging important transmissions and let it capture the loop. After 20 minutes, the voice faded out just like before. I played back the recording, listening carefully to the voice. There was something about it, something in the tone that made my skin crawl. It sounded desperate, but also somehow distant, like the speaker was very far away, or speaking from somewhere enclosed. At 4 in the morning, I made my rounds again. This time, I avoided the lower deck, took a different route through the platform. But I checked every camera, watching each monitor carefully for anything unusual. Camera 7 showed the lower deck as before. Empty, spray-soaked, the newly secured locker closed and undisturbed. I was about to switch to the next camera when the image flickered. Just for a second, barely noticeable. When it came back, there was someone standing on the deck. I leaned forward, my heart pounding. The figure was there clearly, standing near the rail in the same spot where the wet impressions had ended. Tall, wearing dark clothing, facing away from the camera toward the ocean. I grabbed my radio and my flashlight and ran. Down the corridor, through the doorways, out onto the lower deck. The wind grabbed me as soon as I stepped outside, but I fought through it, my flashlight beam cutting through the darkness and spray. The deck was empty. I walked to the rail, to the exact spot where I'd seen the figure on the monitor. Nothing there. Just wet metal and the ocean beyond, rolling in heavy swells under the storm clouds. I looked back toward the camera, wondering if somehow I'd misidentified the location. But no, this was the right spot. I was standing exactly where the figure had been standing. I looked down at the deck. In the beam of my flashlight, I could see the wet impressions again. Fresh ones, the moisture still beading in the marks, leading from where I stood back toward the lockers. I followed them, my light tracing their path across the deck. They led to the wall, to a spot where there was an emergency escape hatch. The hatch was closed, but when I touched it, I could feel vibration through the metal. A rhythmic pulsing, like something was moving on the other side. I should have opened it. Should have checked what was making that vibration. But I couldn't make myself do it. Something in me, some deep instinct, was screaming not to open that hatch, not to see what was on the other side. I backed away and returned to the control room. On the monitor, the deck was empty again. I watched it for the rest of my watch, but nothing else appeared. In the morning, I told Boyd about the figure, about the hatch. He listened without interrupting, his face unreadable. When I finished, he was quiet for a long time. "I saw him too," he finally said. "2 nights ago. That's why I told you to check camera 7. I wanted to know if I was the only one." "Him?" "The radio operator, the one who died in the accident. I looked him up in the old records." Boyd pulled out a folder from his desk, opened it to show me a personnel photo from 30 years ago. A man in his 40s, tall and thin, staring at the camera with serious eyes. The photo sent a chill through me. I'd seen that face. In the doorway, on the monitor. The same tall figure, the same posture. "His name was Marcus Healy," Boyd continued. "He was trying to call for help when the blowout happened. Kept broadcasting even after the fire reached the radio room. They found him at his station, still holding the microphone." He closed the folder. "Last thing he transmitted was the platform designation and a request for assistance. Over and over, just like what you heard." I didn't want to believe it. Didn't want to accept that what I'd seen was anything other than stress and fatigue and coincidence. But the evidence was piling up. The shadow, the figure, the voice loop, the wet impressions, all of it pointing to something I couldn't explain rationally. "What do we do?" I asked. "We wait out the storm, keep the platform running, and we don't go out alone after dark." Boyd looked at me steadily. "Whatever this is, Asa, it's been here for 30 years. It hasn't hurt anyone yet. Maybe it's just trying to be seen, to be acknowledged. Marcus died doing his job, trying to save his crew. Maybe he's still trying." The next few days were tense. The storm continued, keeping us isolated, and every night the radio loop played at 2 in the morning. Every night we saw the figure on camera 7, always in the same spot, always facing the ocean. We stopped going to investigate, just watched on the monitors and logged the sightings. Tamsin heard the loop on the 4th night. She came to the control room pale and shaken, asking if we'd heard it too. Boyd told her everything, the history of the platform, the accident, the sightings. She listened and nodded slowly. "I've felt it," she said quietly. "In the radio room. Sometimes it feels like someone standing behind me, looking over my shoulder. I always thought I was imagining it." "Maybe you were," Boyd said. "Maybe we all are. But it doesn't change what we need to do. We keep the platform running, we keep each other safe, and we wait for the weather to break." On the 7th night, the storm finally began to ease. The wind dropped, the swells decreased, and through breaks in the clouds we could see stars. The supply boat radioed that they'd be here in the morning, weather permitting, to bring the rest of the crew back. That night the radio loop didn't play. Camera 7 showed an empty deck all night. No shadow, no figure. It was as if whatever had been with us knew we were leaving, knew that soon the platform would be full of people again, and had withdrawn. In the morning the boat arrived, bringing fresh supplies and the crew. The platform filled with noise and activity, people everywhere, and the oppressive feeling that had built up over the past week dissipated. I never told anyone else what had happened. Neither did Boyd or Tamsin. There was no point. They wouldn't have believed us, and it would just make us look unstable. But the 3 of us knew. We'd seen something out there in the storm, something that couldn't be explained by equipment failure or exhaustion or stress. 6 months later, I transferred to a different platform. Boyd retired. Tamsin moved to a shore position. We stayed in touch, met for coffee occasionally when we were all in the same port. We never talked directly about those 7 days on Delta 7, but it was always there between us, unspoken. Last I heard, the platform was still operating, New crews rotate through every few weeks, and as far as I know, none of them have reported anything unusual. Maybe it only happens when the platform is nearly empty, when the storm isolates you and there's nothing but ocean and metal and the long, dark nights. Maybe Marcus Healy only appears to those who are alone enough to see him. I don't work platforms anymore. I took a job on a supply boat, where I'm never in one place long enough for anything to settle. But sometimes, when we're heading out to one of the Gulf platforms, and I see it in the distance rising from the ocean on its steel legs, I think about those 7 days. I think about the shadow on camera 7, about the wet footprints leading nowhere, about the voice calling through the static for help that never came. And I wonder if Marcus is still there, still standing at the rail on the lower deck, still broadcasting his desperate message into the storm, still trying to save a crew that died 30 years ago, still waiting for someone to answer his call. The ocean keeps its secrets. The platforms stand silent in the deep water. And somewhere out there, on a platform they used to call North Star, a radio operator is still at his post, still doing his job long after the fire took him, still calling for help that will never arrive. We'd been drilling for 6 weeks when they sealed Module C. Nobody told us why, just that it was contaminated and off limits until further notice. They welded the door shut on a Tuesday morning, and by Tuesday night the whole crew was talking about what might be inside. My name is Ephraim Duplessis, and I'd been working North Sea platforms for 12 years before I signed on to the Njord Deep. It was a newer rig, one of those massive, semi-submersible platforms that could handle the worst weather the North Sea could throw at it. 400 feet of steel and machinery floating on pontoons in water so deep you couldn't see the bottom even on the clearest day. Module C was part of the old section, built back when they first sank the platform. It housed equipment that wasn't used anymore. Old drilling controls, storage for parts we didn't need, that kind of thing. Most of us had barely been in there, no reason to. Everything we needed was in the newer modules. But then, something happened down there. I never got the full story. Lula Vasseur, our medic, said one of the engineers had gone in for a routine check and come out looking like he'd seen death itself. Pale, shaking, wouldn't talk about what he'd found. They flew him off the platform that same day, and by evening the welders were sealing the door. Big steel plate right across the entrance, welded at every seam. They did it quick and professional, like they'd done it before on other platforms. The safety officer stood there watching, making sure nobody got close. When they finished, he posted a contamination warning sign and told us to stay clear. "What kind of contamination?" I asked Jory LaGrange, our bosun. He'd been on the Njord Deep since it was commissioned, knew everything about this platform. Jory just shook his head. "Don't know, don't want to know. They say stay clear, we stay clear." He lit a cigarette and looked at the sealed door. "I've seen this before. On the Brent Alpha, back in '98. They sealed a module just like this, wouldn't tell anyone why. 3 months later, they scuttled the whole platform. Said it was economically unviable, but everyone knew there was something else going on." "You think they'll scuttle this one?" "Hope not. Good money here." He took a long drag and flicked ash onto the deck. "But I've learned not to ask too many questions about things that don't concern me." I took his advice and tried to put it out of my mind. We had work to do. Drilling operations didn't stop just because one module got sealed. My shift was midnight to 8, monitoring the equipment and making sure nothing broke down. The platform ran 24 hours, and someone always needed to be watching the gauges. The first time I heard the sound was 3 nights after they sealed the module. I was doing my rounds, checking the pressure readings on the deck above Module C, when I heard it. A scraping sound, metal on metal, coming from below. Rhythmic and deliberate, like someone dragging a chain across a steel floor. I stopped and listened. The sound continued for maybe 30 seconds, then stopped. I waited, but it didn't come back. Probably just the platform settling, I told myself. These structures made all kinds of noises, especially in rough weather. The North Sea was never really calm, and the constant motion of the water meant the platform was always creaking and groaning. But the sound bothered me. Something about its rhythm felt wrong, too regular to be random settling, too purposeful. I mentioned it to Jory the next morning. He was securing equipment on the main deck, preparing for a storm that was supposed to hit us in 2 days. "You heard it too?" he said, not looking up from his work. "Two? Third person this week. Sound like chains being dragged." "Yeah, coming from Module C." Jory straightened up and wiped his hands on his coveralls. "I heard it the night they sealed it. Thought I was imagining things. But if you heard it too..." He trailed off, looking toward the sealed door. Maybe something's loose in there. Equipment shifting around. Should someone check it? Can't. It's sealed, contaminated, remember? He went back to his work. Best to just ignore it. They'll deal with it when they're ready. But the sound didn't stop. Every night I heard it during my rounds, always around 3 in the morning, always lasting about 30 seconds. That scraping, dragging sound, coming from inside a sealed module where nothing should be moving. Other crew members started reporting it too. The sound had a way of carrying through the platform's ventilation system, echoing through the corridors at odd hours. People were getting spooked. Lula told me she'd been called to treat 3 different workers for anxiety in the past week, all of them complaining about the sounds from Module C. "What do you think is in there?" she asked me one evening in the galley. We were alone, the rest of the crew either sleeping or on shift. Outside the windows, the North Sea was building into heavy swells, the storm getting closer. "Don't know. Could be anything. Or anyone." I looked at her. "What do you mean?" Lula stirred her coffee, not meeting my eyes. "The engineer, they flew off. Before they sealed the module, I treated him before the helicopter came. He wasn't just scared, Ephraim. He was terrified. Kept saying he'd seen someone down there, someone who shouldn't have been there. Maybe there was an intruder, a stowaway on the supply boat. That's what I thought, but he said it wasn't like that. Said the person was..." She paused, choosing her words carefully. "Wrong. That's the word he kept using, wrong." A chill ran through me despite the warm galley. Did he say anything else? Just kept asking if I could hear the chains, over and over. "Can you hear the chains?" I told him no, there were no chains, but he wouldn't believe me. Said they were everywhere, dragging through the corridors, wrapping around the equipment. She finally looked at me. They sedated him before they put him on the helicopter. He was completely broken. The storm hit that night, right in the middle of my shift. Wind at 60 knots, waves high enough to send spray all the way up to the main deck. The platform rode it out like it was built to do, but the motion was rough, everything swaying and tilting as the swells passed underneath. I was in the control room watching the monitors when the power flickered. Just for a second, all the screens went dark, then came back. But in that second of darkness I heard something. Not the scraping sound this time, but voices, multiple voices talking over each other, too distorted to make out the words. The power stabilized and the voices stopped. I checked all the systems. Everything showed normal. No power surge, no fluctuation in the generators. Whatever had caused the flicker hadn't registered on any of the equipment. I made my rounds, checking each section of the platform. Everything was secure, battened down for the storm. When I reached the deck above Module C, I stopped and listened. The scraping sound was there, but different tonight. Louder, more insistent. And underneath it I could hear something else. A low moaning, like wind through a narrow gap, but too steady to be natural. I should have walked away. Should have finished my rounds and gone back to the control room. But something made me go down the stairs to the level where Module C was located. I told myself I just wanted to check the seal, make sure the storm wasn't affecting it. But really, I wanted to know what was making those sounds. The corridor outside Module C was dimly lit by emergency lighting. The sealed door was at the end, the contamination sign bright yellow in the red glow. I walked up to it slowly, my footsteps echoing on the metal floor. The scraping was very loud here, coming from right on the other side of the door. I could hear it clearly now. Definitely chains, being dragged back and forth across the floor. And under that sound, voices. Not distorted anymore, but clear. People talking. Maybe 3 or 4 of them. Their words overlapping so I couldn't make out what they were saying. I put my hand on the door. The metal was cold, vibrating slightly with each scrape of the chains. I leaned closer, trying to hear the voices better, trying to understand what they were saying. That's when someone knocked. 3 loud bangs from inside the module, right where my hand was touching the door. I jumped back, my heart hammering. The knocking came again. 3 deliberate strikes against the metal. Then silence. The scraping stopped. The voices stopped. Everything went quiet except for the storm outside and the hum of the platform's machinery. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the door, waiting for something else to happen. Nothing did. The module was silent now, as if whatever was inside was waiting, listening. I backed away and returned to the control room. My hands were shaking so badly I had to grip the railing as I climbed the stairs. When I got back, I checked the time, 3:15 in the morning. I'd been at the door for less than 5 minutes, but it felt like hours. I didn't tell anyone about the knocking, didn't want to sound crazy, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. Someone or something inside that sealed module had heard me outside and had responded, had knocked to let me know it knew I was there. The next morning, Jory found me in the galley. He looked like he hadn't slept. "You were down at Module C last night," he said. It wasn't a question. "How did you know?" "Security cameras. I was watching the monitors, saw you on the feed." He sat down across from me. "Did you hear it? The knocking?" I nodded slowly. I heard it too. From my quarters. 3 loud bangs, like someone hitting the walls with a hammer. He rubbed his eyes. "This is getting worse, Ephraim. More people are hearing things. The crew's getting scared. Has anyone talked to the company? Asked what's really in there?" "I did. Called the platform manager this morning. He said the module is contaminated with chemical residue from old drilling operations, and it's being handled according to safety protocols. Said the sounds are just pressure equalization and metal expansion. Standard stuff. You believe that?" "No, but what choice do we have? We're under contract. Can't just leave because we're spooked by some sounds." That night, the storm was worse. The platform tilted and swayed as waves hammered the pontoons. My shift was rough, constantly checking systems and making sure nothing was coming loose. Around 2 in the morning, the power flickered again. This time, it stayed off for almost 10 seconds before the emergency generator kicked in. In those 10 seconds of darkness, I heard the voices clearly for the first time. They were coming from the ventilation system, echoing through the whole platform. Men's voices, talking urgently, saying the same things over and over. "Seal it from the inside. Don't let it spread. We can't hold it much longer." Then the power came back and the voices stopped. I grabbed my radio and called Jory. "You hear that?" "Yeah, whole crew heard it. People are panicking." His voice was tight with stress. "I'm getting calls from everyone. They want to know what's going on. Tell them it's the storm, interference in the electrical systems. Nobody's going to believe that." He was right. By morning, half the crew was demanding to be evacuated. They didn't care about their contracts or the money. They wanted off this platform. But the storm was still raging, too rough for helicopters, and it would be another 2 days before the supply boat could reach us. We were stuck. Lula came to me that afternoon. "I need to show you something," she said. She led me to the medical bay and pulled up a file on her computer. "Remember the engineer, the one they evacuated?" "Yeah." I got his medical records, or part of them. The hospital wouldn't release everything, but they sent me the preliminary assessment. She turned the screen so I could see. "Look at this." The report described severe psychological trauma, acute anxiety, possible hallucinations. But there was something else. A note from the examining physician. "Patient displays symptoms consistent with exposure to infrasound frequencies below 20 Hz. Recommend environmental testing of workplace." "Infrasound," I said. "What is that?" "Sound below the range of human hearing. We can't hear it consciously, but our bodies can sense it. It causes anxiety, paranoia, hallucinations. Makes people see and hear things that aren't there." She closed the file. "If there's something in Module C generating infrasound, it would explain everything. The sounds we're hearing might be our brains trying to interpret frequencies we're not meant to perceive." "Is that why they sealed it?" "Maybe. If they discovered an infrasound source, they'd want to contain it. Keep it from affecting the rest of the platform." She paused. "But that doesn't explain the voices. Infrasound doesn't make people hear specific words." That night, I stayed away from Module C, did my rounds on the upper levels, checked the equipment from as far away as I could manage. But at 3 a.m, my radio crackled, and Jory's voice came through, barely audible over static. "Ephraim, need you. Lower deck. Jory, what's wrong?" No response. Just static. I tried calling back, but the radio was dead. I grabbed a flashlight and headed down to the lower deck where Jory's quarters were located. The corridors were empty, lit by the dim red emergency lights. The platform was still swaying from the storm, making it hard to walk straight. I found Jory standing outside Module C. He was facing the sealed door, not moving, just staring at it. His radio was on the floor beside him. "Jory?" He didn't respond. I moved closer and touched his shoulder. He flinched and turned, and I saw his face. His eyes were wide, unfocused, like he was looking at something far away. "Can you hear them?" he whispered. "Hear what?" "The chains. They're so loud now." He turned back to the door. "They want us to open it. They need help." "Nobody's in there, Jory. It's sealed. Contaminated. They're in there. I can hear them. They've been trapped since the accident." He reached for the door, his hand trembling. "We have to let them out." I grabbed his arm and pulled him back. "What accident? What are you talking about?" He looked at me, and for a moment his eyes seemed to clear. "The accident, when they were building the platform, the crew that—" He stopped, shaking his head like he was trying to clear water from his ears. "I don't know, I can't remember, but they're in there. They need help." I pulled him away from the door, back down the corridor toward the stairs. He didn't resist, just followed like a sleepwalker. When we got to the galley, I sat him down and made him drink coffee. Slowly, the confusion cleared from his face. "What happened?" he asked. I told him. He listened, growing paler. "I don't remember going down there. Last thing I remember, I was in my bunk. Then I was standing at the door." "You were talking about an accident during construction." Jory frowned, trying to remember. "I don't know anything about an accident." As far as I know, the platform was built without incident." He looked at his hands. They were still shaking. But I could hear them, Ephraim, so clearly. People trapped in there, calling for help. It felt real. The next morning, I did something I probably shouldn't have. I went to the platform's administrative office and searched through the old files, looking for anything about the construction of the Njord Deep, anything about Module C. Most of the files were digital, but there were some old paper records in the back. I found what I was looking for in a box marked Construction Phase 1. There had been an accident. During the initial building of the platform, back in 2003, a section of Module C had collapsed during installation, trapping 6 workers inside. They'd tried to rescue them, but the structure was too unstable. The decision had been made to seal the section and recover the bodies later, but they never did. According to the notes, the sealed section was deemed too dangerous to access. The families were compensated, the incident was classified, and construction continued. Module C had been built around that sealed section, incorporating it into the new structure. 6 men had been trapped in there for 17 years. I sat there staring at the file, feeling sick. The scraping sounds, the chains, the voices, they weren't infrasound or hallucinations. They were real. The men were still in there, or whatever was left of them, and now something was making their presence known. I took the file and went to find Lula. She read through it, her face grave. "We need to tell someone. The company, the authorities." "Tell them what? That we found a classified report about an accident 17 years ago? They already know. They sealed it for a reason. But the crew is being affected. People are hearing things, seeing things. Jory almost..." She stopped. "We can't just ignore this." That night, the 3rd night of the storm, everything changed. The power went out completely at midnight, plunging the entire platform into darkness. The emergency generator didn't kick in. We were running on battery-powered emergency lights only, red glow barely enough to see by. I was in the control room when it happened, trying to get the systems back online. Through the windows, I could see the storm raging, waves crashing against the platform legs, and then I saw lights on the lower deck. Moving lights, like flashlights, but no one should have been down there. I grabbed my own flashlight and headed down. The corridors were pitch black except for the emergency lights. I could hear the storm, but under it, another sound. Footsteps. Multiple sets of footsteps, walking through the corridors below. I reached the lower deck and stopped. The corridor outside Module C was lit by strange phosphorescent glow, like foxfire or bioluminescence. And in that glow, I could see wet footprints, leading from the sealed door down the corridor, ending at the stairs that led up to the main deck. I followed them with my flashlight. The prints were clear. Work boots, several different sizes, the kind we all wore. But they were wet, dripping, leaving puddles on the floor. And they were fresh. I could see the water still beating on the metal. The footprints led up the stairs. I followed, my heart pounding, my flashlight beam shaking. At the top of the stairs, the prints continued across the deck, heading toward the rail. They ended at the edge, at the rail overlooking the sea. Just stopped, like whoever made them had walked to the edge and then... what? Stepped over? Jumped? I looked down at the water, churning 40 feet below. In the glow from the emergency lights, I could see something. Shapes in the water, pale and indistinct, moving beneath the surface. 6 of them, swimming away from the platform, heading out into the dark ocean. Then they were gone. The power came back on all at once, the generators roaring to life, every light on the platform blazing. I stood at the rail, blinking in the sudden brightness, looking down at water that showed nothing but waves. Behind me, I heard voices. The crew was emerging from their quarters, confused and frightened by the blackout. Jory was there, and Lula, and others. They gathered on the deck, talking nervously, checking that everyone was okay. I looked back at the deck where the wet footprints had been. They were gone. The metal was dry, as if it had never been wet at all. Later that night, after the storm finally started to break, I went down to Module C one more time. The corridor was quiet, the emergency lights casting their red glow. The sealed door was unchanged, the welds still solid, the contamination warning still bright. But something was different. The door wasn't vibrating anymore. The scraping sound was gone. I put my hand on the metal and felt nothing but cold steel, completely still. Whatever had been in there, whatever had been making those sounds, was gone. The next morning, the supply boat arrived with the crew rotation. Half our people left, replaced by fresh workers who knew nothing about what had happened. The company sent inspectors who checked Module C, tested for contamination, declared it safe for eventual unsealing. But they didn't unseal it, not while I was there, and I heard later that they never did. The module remained sealed, marked as contaminated, left alone. Jory and I never talked about that night. Neither did Lula. We finished our rotation, took our pay, and moved on to other platforms. I heard Jory retired not long after. Lula transferred to an onshore position. As for me, I kept working the North Sea, but I never went back to the Njord Deep. Sometimes at night, when I'm on watch and the platform is quiet, I think about those wet footprints. About 6 men trapped in a collapsed section for 17 years, finally finding a way out. About whatever had been keeping them there and what it meant that they were free. And I think about other platforms, other sealed modules, other accidents that were buried and classified and forgotten. I wonder how many of them have men still trapped inside, still making sounds in the darkness, still trying to find a way home. The North Sea is deep and cold and unforgiving. The platforms that stand in it are monuments to human ambition and human tragedy both. And sometimes, when the storms are worst and the power fails and the emergency lights cast everything in red, those tragedies find their voice. The chains still drag in my dreams sometimes, and in my dreams, I open the door. I see what's inside. 6 men standing in darkness, wet and pale, their work boots dripping seawater onto the steel floor. They look at me with eyes that have seen 17 years of darkness, and they ask me the question I can never answer. Why did you leave us here? I wake up before I can respond, but the question stays with me, following me through my days, echoing in every corridor of every platform I work. A reminder that the ocean takes what it wants, and sometimes what it takes doesn't want to stay taken. Module C is still sealed. The footprints are gone. The voices are silent. But on stormy nights, when the wind is right and the platform groans under the weight of the waves, I swear I can still hear them. 6 men walking through corridors, their boots wet with seawater, chains dragging behind them. I found the old logbook in a storage locker nobody had opened in years. Dust an inch thick on everything. Spare parts for equipment we didn't use anymore. Boxes of paperwork from before they went digital. The logbook was at the bottom of one of those boxes. Leather cover cracked and stained with what looked like oil. My name is Ivor Blackwell, and I'd been working the North Sea for 8 years before I came to Platform Echo 9. It was an older rig, one of the first-generation semi-submersibles, kept running through constant maintenance and the stubborn refusal of the company to write off the investment. We were 70 miles from the Scottish coast, drilling in water deep enough that you couldn't see bottom even with the ROV cameras at full extension. I was looking for maintenance records when I found the logbook. Pike Malloy, our tool pusher, had asked me to dig up the service history for one of the old pumps. Pike was old school, didn't trust the digital records, Always wanted paper backup for everything. So I was down in storage, going through boxes when I found it. The logbook was labeled Platform Echo 9, Shift Records, 1994 to 1995. I flipped it open out of curiosity just to see what the old cruise had been like. The entries were handwritten, different people recording their shifts, noting equipment status and weather conditions and routine maintenance. I was about to close it when I noticed something strange. An entry dated March 15, 1994, written in neat block letters, describing a routine night shift. Nothing unusual about it, except that below it, written in completely different handwriting, was another entry. Same date, March 15, 94, same shift time. But describing different events, a generator failure, an emergency repair, conditions the first entry never mentioned. I flipped through more pages. It happened again and again. Dates that appeared twice, sometimes 3 times, with different handwriting, different events. Like multiple people had worked the same shift in parallel universes and all of them had written it down in the same book. I took the logbook up to show Pike. He was in the workshop, rebuilding a valve assembly, his hands black with grease. He looked at the pages I showed him and frowned. "Filing error," he said. "Someone wrote the wrong date, then someone else did the same. Happens. 3 times on the same date? People make mistakes." He went back to his work. "Anything useful in there about the pump?" "Not yet, still looking." I took the logbook back to my quarters that night. I couldn't stop thinking about those duplicate entries. The handwriting was different in each one, and the details were too specific to be mistakes. These were real shift reports, written by people who had actually worked those shifts. But how could 3 different people work the same shift on the same date? I started reading through the entire logbook systematically. Most entries were normal, single reports for single shifts. But scattered throughout, maybe once every 20 or 30 pages, I'd find these duplicates. Always different handwriting, always describing different events during the same time period. Then I found something that made my skin crawl. An entry dated June 8, 1994, written in shaky handwriting that was hard to read. The worker, someone named R. Hendricks, had written, "Generator room, temperature fluctuations. Heard voices on the lower level, but no one there when I checked. Clock in the control room running backwards. Shift supervisor says I'm seeing things, but I know what I saw. Something wrong with this platform." Below that entry, in different handwriting, another report for June 8, 1994. This one was calm and routine, reporting normal operations. No problems at all. I checked the date against the current calendar. June 8, 1994 had been a Wednesday. Today was Wednesday, November 12, 2014. I did the math. Exactly 20 years, 5 months, and 4 days. I'm not a superstitious person. 8 years on platforms teaches you that strange sounds and odd occurrences usually have rational explanations. Metal expands and contracts, equipment malfunctions, tired minds play tricks. But something about those duplicate entries bothered me in a way I couldn't dismiss. The next morning, I asked Celia Halverson, our ROV technician, if she knew anything about the platform's history. Celia had been working Echo 9 longer than anyone, almost 15 years. If anyone knew the stories, it would be her. "Why do you ask?" she said, not looking up from the control panel where she was programming a maintenance dive. "Just curious. Found an old logbook, some weird entries." "Weird how?" I told her about the duplicate dates. She stopped what she was doing and looked at me. "Where did you find this logbook?" "A storage locker, level 3. Celia was quiet for a moment. "There are stories about this platform. Before my time, but I've heard them. They say time doesn't work right here. People experiencing the same shift twice. equipment showing impossible readings, clocks running wrong. She turned back to her controls. I've never experienced anything like that myself, but others have. What do you mean time doesn't work right? I mean exactly that. Time skipping, looping, running at different speeds in different parts of the platform. It doesn't happen often, and when it does, it's subtle, easy to dismiss as equipment error or human mistake. She paused. But I've seen the maintenance logs. We've replaced the control room clock 17 times in 15 years. Every time it starts running wrong, too fast, too slow, sometimes backwards. We install a new one, it works fine for a while, then starts acting up again. That's just a malfunction. Bad batch of clocks. 17 times, from different manufacturers. She shook her head. No, it's something else. Something about this location. I spent the rest of the day thinking about what Celia had said. That night, I was on shift with Pike, monitoring the drilling operations and keeping an eye on the equipment. Around 2 a.m, Pike went down to check on a pump that was showing unusual pressure readings. I stayed in the control room, watching the monitors. The clock on the wall showed 2:17 a.m. I was looking at it when the second hand stopped. Just froze mid-tick, pointing at the 6. I watched it for a full minute, but it didn't move. Then suddenly it jumped forward, skipping ahead about 10 seconds, and continued ticking normally. I checked my watch. It showed 2:18 a.m., which is what it should have been. The wall clock now showed 2:17, running about a minute slow. I made a note to report it for replacement. Pike came back 20 minutes later. "Pump's fine," he said. "Pressure readings are back to normal." He looked at the clock. "That thing acting up again?" "Yeah." Stopped for a minute, then jumped forward. "They never last long here." He sat down at the control panel. "I've been on this platform 6 years, Ivor. Seen 4 different clocks in that spot. They all do the same thing eventually. Celia told me about the stories, about time not working right here." Pike was quiet for a moment. "I don't put much stock in stories. But I've seen things I can't explain. Equipment readings that don't make sense, shifts that feel longer or shorter than they should be." He looked at me. "You ever lose time? Like, you're working and then suddenly an hour has passed and you don't remember any of it?" "No. It's happened to me twice. Once I was in the equipment room doing maintenance, and the next thing I knew I was back in the control room with no memory of walking there. Lost about 40 minutes. He rubbed his eyes. Could have been fatigue, microsleep, something like that. But it didn't feel like that. Around 4 a.m, I went down to the lower level to check the generators. The platform had 3 main generators running in rotation, keeping everything powered. The generator room was loud, hot, filled with the smell of diesel and machinery. I did my walk around, checking the gauges, looking for leaks or loose connections. That's when I heard it. A metallic clicking sound regular as a heartbeat, coming from the corner of the room. I followed the sound to a junction box mounted on the wall. The clicking was coming from inside it, but when I opened the cover, everything looked normal. No loose wires, no sparking, nothing that should be making that sound. I closed the cover and the clicking stopped. I waited, listening. Nothing. I turned to leave and the clicking started again. I turned back and it stopped. I stood there for a full minute, testing it. Every time I faced away from the junction box, the clicking started. Every time I looked at it, the clicking stopped. Like whatever was making the sound didn't want to be observed. I radioed Pike. "You getting any unusual readings from the generator room?" "No. Everything nominal. Why?" "Just checking." I didn't mention the clicking. Didn't want to sound paranoid. I finished my inspection and headed back up. As I walked through the corridor past the equipment lockers, I saw something that made me stop. One of the locker doors was open, and inside I could see tools scattered on the floor. The locker should have been locked. We kept it secured because of the expensive equipment inside. I went to investigate and found that the lock wasn't broken. It was unlocked, the key still in it. But I knew that locker had been locked earlier. I'd checked it myself during my last rounds. I gathered the tools and put them back on their shelves, then locked the locker and pocketed the key. Probably someone had been in there and forgotten to lock it. Easy mistake. But it bothered me. Another small thing that didn't quite fit. Back in the control room, Pike was staring at the monitors. "Come look at this," he said. I joined him at the panel. He pointed to one of the screens showing the ROV camera feed. The ROV was parked on the seafloor, its lights illuminating the muddy bottom and the platform legs. But something was off about the image. It looked doubled, like a photograph that had been exposed twice. I could see the seafloor clearly, but overlaid on it, faint and translucent, was another image. The same view, but from a slightly different angle. "Camera malfunction?" I said. "That's what I thought, but look." Pike switched to a different camera. The image was normal, switched back to the first camera, still doubled. He called Celia on the radio. She was asleep, but came up to the control room in her robe, looking annoyed. She looked at the monitor and frowned. "Bring it up. I need to check the camera." It took about 20 minutes to retrieve the ROV. When it surfaced, Celia examined the camera housing carefully. "Nothing wrong with it," she said. "Lens is clean, connections are solid, electronics look fine." "But the image was doubled," Pike said. "I know. I saw it." Celia looked troubled. "This is the third time this month we've had strange camera readings. Last week, the ROV was showing depth readings that didn't match the sonar. Week before that, one of the cameras captured something on the seafloor that wasn't there when we sent the ROV back to check." "What kind of something?" "Objects, equipment that shouldn't have been there. Old drilling tools, pieces of structure. But when we went to investigate, nothing, just empty seafloor." The rest of the shift passed without incident. Pike and I kept watching the monitors, checking the equipment, logging the routine operations. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off, that the platform was behaving in ways that were subtly wrong. In the morning, after my shift ended, I went back to the storage locker and found the logbook again. I flipped through it looking for more entries about strange occurrences. Found plenty. Scattered through the pages were reports of equipment acting up, time anomalies, things appearing and disappearing. One entry from August 1994 caught my attention. Found a wrench on the lower deck that belongs to me. The strange part is, I still have that wrench. Checked my toolbox and it's there. But I'm holding an identical wrench that has my initials scratched on the handle. 2 copies of the same tool. Showed it to the supervisor and he told me to throw the extra one overboard. But how can there be 2? Another entry from October 1994. Working night shift alone in the control room. Heard someone walking in the corridor outside. Called out, but no response. Went to check and saw someone going around the corner. Followed, but found nobody. Checked the sign-in log. I'm the only person assigned to this shift. Who was I seeing? The entries were all like that. Small, impossible things. Easy to dismiss individually, but adding up to a pattern. Something was wrong with platform Echo 9. Something had been wrong for at least 20 years. I showed the logbook to Pike that evening. He read through the entries I'd marked, his expression growing more concerned. "This is more extensive than I thought," he said quietly. "I knew there were stories, but seeing it all documented like this, what do we do? Nothing we can do. Report it to management, they'll say it's all explainable. Equipment malfunctions, human error, fatigue-induced hallucinations. He closed the logbook. But between you and me, Ivor, I think something happened here. Long before either of us came. Something that broke the normal rules. What kind of something? Don't know, but I've heard rumors. An accident during the initial installation, back when they were sinking the platform legs. Something went wrong with the timing of the concrete pour. The foundation piles were supposed to be set in a specific sequence, but the schedule got confused. Multiple crews working overlapping shifts, nobody sure who was doing what when. He paused. Story goes that when they checked the work afterwards, they found concrete that had been poured twice. Same location, same depth, but two separate pours somehow occupying the same space. That's impossible. Yeah, it is, but that's the story. Pike handed the logbook back to me. Keep this. Document anything else you experience. Maybe someday someone will want to investigate properly. That night, I was on shift again, this time working alone. Pike had the night off, and the other crew members were either sleeping or working other sections of the platform. I was in the control room monitoring the automated drilling operations when the generator warning light came on. I checked the readings. Generator 2 was showing a temperature spike. Not critical yet, but high enough that I needed to go check it. I grabbed my tools and headed down to the generator room. The room was hotter than usual. I could feel it as soon as I opened the door, a wall of heat that made my skin prickle. Generator 2 was running, but something was off. The normal, rhythmic sound of the engine had a strange quality to it, like an echo or a reverb effect. I approached the generator and checked the gauges. Temperature was high, but not dangerous. Oil pressure normal. Everything should have been fine, but the sound was wrong. I put my hand on the generator housing and felt the vibration. It was pulsing in a pattern that didn't match the engine rhythm, like two engines running slightly out of sync with each other. I walked around to the far side of the generator and stopped. There were marks on the floor, wet footprints, like someone had been standing in water and walked across the room, but the floor was dry everywhere else, and there was no water source nearby. I followed the footprints. They led from the generator to the corner of the room where I'd heard the clicking sound earlier. They stopped at the junction box, then just ended. Whoever had made them had walked to the junction box and then vanished. I opened the junction box and looked inside. Everything was normal, but when I closed it and turned away, I heard the clicking start again. This time, I didn't turn back. I just listened. The clicking was regular, mechanical, like a relay switching on and off. But underneath it, I could hear something else. A voice too faint and distorted to understand, saying something over and over. I moved closer to the junction box, trying to hear better. The voice was there, definitely human, speaking in a rhythm that matched the clicking. I put my ear close to the junction box and finally made out the words. Check the time. Check the time. Check the time. I pulled back, my heart racing. That voice was coming from inside the junction box, from inside the wiring, impossible as that was. I grabbed my radio to call Pike, then stopped. What was I going to tell him? That I was hearing voices in the electrical system. I closed the generator room door and went back to the control room. The clock on the wall showed 3:45 a.m. My watch showed 3:33 a.m. 12-minute difference. I checked the computer timestamp. It matched my watch. The wall clock was running fast. I made a note in the shift log, recording the generator temperature spike and the clock discrepancy. As I wrote, I noticed something. My handwriting looked strange, shaky in a way it normally wasn't. I looked at my hand, and it was trembling slightly. The rest of the shift I stayed in the control room, watching the monitors, checking systems remotely. I didn't want to go back down to the generator room. Didn't want to hear that voice again. The generators ran normally for the rest of the night, and when Pike came to relieve me in the morning, everything seemed fine. "How was the night?" he asked. "Generator 2 had a temperature spike. Checked out okay. Anything else?" I almost saw Mazda told him about the voice, about the footprints. But in the morning light, with the platform humming with activity from the day shift, it seemed unreal. No. Quiet shift. But that day I went back to the storage locker and looked at the old logbook again. Flipped through the pages until I found what I was looking for. An entry from June 1994, written in the same shaky handwriting as the one about the control room clock running backwards. "Generator room." Heard someone speaking inside the junction box, saying check the time over and over. Opened the box and found nothing wrong, but the voice continued. "I think something is trapped in the electrical system, something that knows the time is wrong." Below that entry, in different handwriting, another report for the same date. Normal shift, no problems reported. I photographed every page of the logbook with my phone. Hundreds of entries spanning 2 years, all the duplicate dates, all the reports of impossible things. I saved them to my computer and backed them up to a drive I kept in my locker. That night, Celia came to me with a troubled expression. "I need to show you something," she said. She led me to the ROV control room and pulled up footage from the seafloor cameras. This was recorded 3 days ago during a routine inspection. The footage showed the platform legs, the massive concrete and steel structures that anchored us to the seafloor. The ROV moved slowly along the base of one leg, its lights illuminating the marine growth and sediment. Then the image doubled, just like I'd seen before. 2 versions of the same view, overlaid but slightly offset in time. In one image, the leg was covered in normal marine growth. In the other, the leg looked newer, cleaner, like it had only been installed recently. As the ROV moved, the 2 images flickered back and forth, showing the same structure at different points in time. "How is that possible?" I asked. "It's not, but there it is." Celia stopped the footage. "I've checked everything. The camera is working perfectly. The ROV electronics are fine. This isn't a malfunction. It's like the camera is seeing 2 different times at once. Have you shown this to anyone?" "Pike. He told me to keep it quiet. Didn't want to alarm the crew." She looked at me. "Ivor, I think we're in a place where time isn't stable. Where past and present exist simultaneously. The duplicate entries in that logbook, the time anomalies, the doubled images, it's all connected. What caused it? I don't know, but I think it happened during the installation. Something went wrong, some alignment error or timing mistake, and it created a..." She struggled for the word. "A fold, a place where time doubles back on itself." The next week passed in increasing strangeness. The control room clock had to be reset every day as it ran faster and faster. The clicking in the generator room grew louder. More wet footprints appeared in various locations, always leading nowhere. Tools went missing and reappeared in impossible places. Pike started documenting everything, keeping detailed notes of every anomaly. Celia captured more ROV footage showing temporal doubling. I continued reading the old logbook, finding more and more entries that matched our experiences. Then came the night shift when everything fell apart. I was alone in the control room at 2:00 a.m. when the power flickered. The lights dimmed for just a second, then came back. But when they came back, something was different. The control room looked the same but felt wrong, like I was seeing it through a filter. I checked the monitors. All the cameras showed normal operations. But when I looked at the timestamps, I froze. Every monitor was showing a different time. One said 2:00 a.m. Another said 2:15 a.m. A third said 1:47 a.m. The wall clock said 2:33 a.m. My watch said 2:01 a.m. I grabbed my radio. "Pike, you there?" Static, then his voice, but distorted, echoing. "Ivor, where are you? Can't find—" "I'm in the control room." "Where are you?" "Control room, but you're not—" "Nobody here." I looked around the control room. I was alone, but Pike was saying he was here too. We were in the same place but couldn't see each other. The monitors flickered and changed. Now they showed views of the platform I didn't recognize. Different equipment, different configurations. Some looked older than they should be, others looked newer. I was seeing multiple versions of the platform, all existing at once. I ran to the window and looked out at the deck. It was empty in the normal light, but in the sodium lamp's glow, I could see shadows moving. People working, walking between equipment. But they weren't there. They were shadows of workers from other times, other shifts, bleeding through into now. The radio crackled. Multiple voices talking at once. I recognized Pike's voice and Celia's, but there were others too. Workers I didn't know, reporting from shifts that were happening years ago or years from now, all of their transmissions arriving at the same moment. I looked at the shift log on the desk in front of me. As I watched, new entries appeared in the handwriting of people I'd never met, recording shifts that were happening simultaneously with mine. The pages filled with overlapping reports, multiple versions of the same night all being recorded at once. The clicking from the generator room grew louder until I could hear it even up here, and under it, voices. Dozens of them, all saying the same thing. "Check the time." I grabbed the old logbook from my locker and opened it to today's date. November 19th, 2014. The page was blank, but as I watched, writing appeared, my handwriting, recording this shift, and then other handwriting, other reports for November 19th, 2014, describing different events, different experiences, all happening now. I understood then what was happening. The fold in time that Celia had described wasn't just showing us the past. It was compressing all times into one moment. Every shift ever worked on Platform Echo 9 was happening simultaneously, all of them trying to occupy the same space, the same duration. The power flickered again. When it came back, the control room was full of people, translucent, ghost-like, but there. Workers from decades of shifts, all present at once. They moved through their routines, checking gauges, recording data, unaware of each other or of me. I saw Pike, but he was younger, thinner, wearing the uniform style from years ago. He walked right through where I was standing and felt nothing. I saw Celia at the ROV controls, but she looked different. Her hair a different length. She was operating equipment that wasn't there anymore, recording data that had already been recorded. I saw myself. Translucent like the others, standing at the control panel, checking monitors. I watched myself reach for the radio, saw my own lips move as I called for Pike. I was watching a version of myself from a few minutes ago, or a few minutes from now, I couldn't tell which. The voices on the radio reached a crescendo. Hundreds of transmissions, all the shifts, all the workers, all calling for help or reporting status or asking questions. The sound was overwhelming, and then suddenly everything stopped. The power went out completely. Total darkness, total silence. For a long moment I stood there in the blackness, hearing nothing but my own breathing and the distant sound of the sea. When the emergency generator kicked in and the lights came back, the control room was empty. Just me. The monitors showed normal times, all synchronized. The radio was quiet. The clicking had stopped. I checked my watch, 2:03 a.m. Only 3 minutes had passed. I sat down at the control panel, my legs shaking too badly to stand. The shift log was in front of me, and I picked it up with trembling hands. My entry was there, in my handwriting, describing a normal shift. Nothing about the temporal collapse, nothing about the overlapping times. But the page was different. When I held it up to the light, I could see other writing underneath mine. Faint impressions, like someone had written on pages above this one, and the pressure had left marks. I could make out words, fragments of other shift reports all compressed together in the paper fibers. I picked up the old logbook and opened it to today's date. The page was filled now, multiple entries for November 19th, 2014. Different handwriting, different reports. But one entry, in handwriting that looked like mine but shakier, said, "Time collapsed at Euro 200 hours. Saw all shifts happening at once." The fold is getting worse. If anyone reads this, the timing error in the foundation, when they poured the concrete, it created an overlap. The platform exists in multiple time frames and simultaneously. It's been getting worse for 20 years. Eventually, all the times will merge, and there will be no distinction between past, present, and future. Everyone who ever worked here will be working here forever, trapped in an eternal moment that never ends. I closed the logbook and put it back in my locker. Got through the rest of the shift on autopilot, checking systems, monitoring equipment, trying not to think about what I'd experienced. In the morning, Pike came to relieve me. He looked exhausted. "Rough night?" I asked. "Couldn't sleep. Kept having dreams that I was working my shift over and over. Same tasks, same checks, repeating endlessly." He looked at me. "You look like hell. You okay?" "Yeah, just tired." I left the control room and went to my quarters. Lay down on my bunk and stared at the ceiling. In 20 years, I thought, maybe less, the fold would complete. All times would merge. Everyone who ever worked Platform Echo 9 would be trapped here, experiencing the same shifts over and over, unable to distinguish between iterations, unable to escape. We were already trapped, we just didn't know it yet. I stayed on Platform Echo 9 for another 2 weeks, finishing my rotation. Every night I experienced small anomalies, clocks running wrong, voices in the generator room, shadows that didn't match their sources, but nothing as dramatic as that night in the control room. When I left, I took the old logbook with me. Told Pike I wanted to research it, maybe write something about the platform's history. He didn't object. I don't think he wanted it around anymore. I never went back to Echo 9. Took a job on a different platform, one that didn't have time anomalies or voices in the junction boxes, but I kept the logbook. Still have it, locked in a drawer in my apartment. Sometimes I take it out and flip through the pages. The entries continue past where they should. Dates after 1995, recorded in handwriting I recognize. Pike's handwriting, Celia's, mine. Recording shifts we haven't worked yet, or shifts we've already worked but don't remember. The last entry in the logbook is dated December 31st, 2024, 10 years from now. It's in my handwriting, but older, shakier. It says, "Final entry. The fold is complete. Time has stopped distinguishing between moments. We are all working the same shift now, forever. I can see them all, every worker who ever served on Echo 9, all present, all performing their duties simultaneously. Pike is here. Celia is here. Even the ones who died are here, still working, unaware that death hasn't released them. The platform will operate forever, maintained by a crew trapped in an eternal moment. If you're reading this, you're already part of it. You always were. The fold doesn't just trap those on the platform. It traps anyone connected to it, anyone who reads these words, anyone who thinks about what happened here. Time is a circle that keeps tightening. Eventually, we're all inside it. Eventually, we're all working the same endless shift. Check the time. It doesn't matter what it says, it's always 2 a.m. here. Always will be. I'll see you there. I always do. I put the logbook back in the drawer and lock it. Try not to think about it. But every night at 2 o'clock a.m. I wake up, and for just a moment, I can hear the clicking. The voice saying, check the time. And I wonder if I ever really left Platform Echo 9 at all, or if I'm still there working my shift, one of the shadows moving through routines that never end, recording my observations in a logbook that exists in all times simultaneously, waiting for the fold to complete. The first time I saw the light, I thought it was a ship. We were 60 miles offshore in the Gulf of Mexico, drilling in water so deep the bottom was just a number on a screen. I was on the night shift, standing on the helipad, having a cigarette, when I noticed it on the horizon. A steady, white light, blinking with perfect rhythm. Flash, pause, flash, pause. My name is Calder Murdaugh, and I'd been working Gulf platforms for 16 years. Seen my share of strange things out here. St. Elmo's fire dancing on the derrick, bioluminescent algae making the water glow green. Once even a waterspout that came close enough to feel the spray. But I'd never seen a navigation light where that one was positioned. I finished my cigarette and went back inside to the control room. Pulled up the navigation charts and checked the coordinates. According to every chart we had, there was nothing out there. No platforms, no buoys, no structures of any kind. Just open water. I radioed the watch officer on duty. You seeing that light? Southwest? Maybe 3 miles out? What light? Navigation beacon. Blinking white. There was a pause. I don't see anything on radar. You sure you're seeing a light? I went back outside and looked. The light was still there, steady and rhythmic. But when I went back to the control room and looked at the radar screen, he was right. Nothing showed up. Just empty ocean. Must be a small boat, the watch officer said. Too small for radar. At midnight, 3 miles out? Fishermen, maybe. Or pleasure craft. He didn't sound convinced. Keep an eye on it. Let me know if it moves. I watched the light for the rest of my shift. It never moved, never changed its rhythm. Just kept blinking in the same spot, marking nothing that should be there. When my relief came at dawn, the light was gone. I figured it had been a boat after all, one that had moved off before sunrise. But the next night, it was back. Same location, same rhythm. I checked the charts again, checked the radar again. Nothing. The light existed. I could see it clearly, but according to our instruments, it wasn't there. Mabel St. James, our night cook, came out to the helipad around 2 in the morning with coffee. She saw me staring at the horizon and followed my gaze. You see it too? She asked. The light? Yeah. Been there 4 nights now. Started last Thursday. She handed me the coffee. I asked the day crew about it. Nobody sees it during daylight, only appears after dark. You report it? To who? We don't see it on radar, don't see it on charts. Far as the instruments know, it's not there. She sipped her coffee. But I know what I'm seeing. That's a marker buoy. The kind they use for navigation or to mark hazards. There's no hazard out there, just open water. Now, maybe. But what about before? What about 50 years ago, 100? She looked at me. The Gulf has a lot of history under that water. A lot of ships went down out here. Maybe that buoy is marking something that's been down there so long everyone forgot about it. I thought about that over the next few nights as I watched the light. Mabel had a point. The Gulf floor was littered with wrecks, cargo ships, fishing boats, even a few warships from various conflicts. Most of them were charted and known, but there were probably dozens more that had been lost and forgotten. But that didn't explain why the buoy only appeared at night, or why our instruments couldn't detect it. On the sixth night, I decided to get a closer look. We had a small workboat tied up at the platform, used for short-range inspections and equipment transfers. I checked it out, telling the watch officer I was going to inspect one of the platform legs for damage, which was technically allowed, though not usually done at midnight. The sea was calm, barely any swell, perfect conditions. I started the engine and headed southwest toward the light. As I got closer, I could make out more details. It was definitely a buoy, the cylindrical kind with a light mounted on top. But it looked old, the metal corroded and covered in marine growth. I pulled the boat alongside and grabbed my flashlight for a better look. The buoy was maybe 6 feet tall, anchored to the bottom by a chain that disappeared into the dark water below. The light on top was a simple beacon, battery-powered by the look of it, though I couldn't see how batteries could still be working on something this old. There was writing on the side of the buoy, stamped into the metal. I wiped away some of the marine growth and read, USCG, property of United States Coast Guard, marker 7 Delta, as to 1963. Over 50 years ago, but the light was still working, still blinking with perfect rhythm, and the buoy looked like it had been maintained recently despite the corrosion. I reached out to touch it, and the metal was cold, much colder than it should have been. The Gulf water was warm this time of year, 75 degrees or more, but the buoy felt like it had been sitting in ice water. I pulled back and noticed something else. The water around the buoy was completely still. Even though there was a slight current running through the area, the water within maybe 10 feet of the buoy was perfectly flat, like glass. No ripples, no movement at all. I tried the radio. Platform, this is Murdaugh. I'm at the buoy. It's marked as Coast Guard property from 1963. You want me to take coordinates? Static. Pure static, no voice coming through at all. I checked the radio. It was working, the battery was full, but I was getting nothing but static on every channel. I tried again. Platform, do you copy? More static. Then, faintly, underneath the static, I heard something. A voice, but not the watch officer's voice. Older, tinny, like it was coming from a recording made decades ago. Marker 7 Delta reporting. Coordinates 28 north, 89 west. Hazard confirmed. Do not approach. The voice faded back into static. I tried responding, but got nothing. I looked back toward the platform, maybe 3 miles away now, its lights bright against the dark sky. But something was wrong. The lights looked dimmer than they should, and the platform seemed farther away, like I'd drifted more than I thought. I checked my GPS. The coordinates showed I was exactly where I should be, right next to the buoy. But when I looked at the platform again, it seemed even more distant, and the lights were definitely dimmer. Then I noticed the wind had stopped. Completely. The Gulf is never perfectly calm. There's always some breeze, even on the stillest nights. But now the air was absolutely motionless. No wind, no sound except the gentle idle of my boat's engine and the rhythmic click of the buoy's light as it blinked on and off. I reached for the throttle to head back to the platform, and that's when I saw the chain, the one anchoring the buoy to the sea floor. It was moving, not swaying with current, but rising, slowly pulling up from the depths, link by link, like something was climbing it from below. I gunned the engine and turned the boat back toward the platform. As I accelerated away, I looked back once. The chain was still rising, and there was something on it now, something dark and massive, pulling itself up toward the buoy. I didn't wait to see what it was. The trip back to the platform should have taken 5 minutes. It took 20. The whole time I could see the platform in the distance, but it seemed to stay the same distance away no matter how fast I went. Like I was traveling, but not actually covering any ground. Then suddenly, I was there, bumping against the platform legs, tying up the workboat with hands that shook so badly I could barely manage the knots. I climbed up to the main deck and went straight to the control room. The watch officer looked up when I came in. "Murdo? Thought you were inspecting the south leg." I was. I went out to check that buoy. "What buoy?" I pointed through the window toward the southwest. "That one. The light we've been seeing." He looked where I was pointing. "I don't see any light." I looked. He was right. The light was gone. Just dark ocean stretching out to the horizon. It was there. I went out to it, got close enough to touch it. Coast Guard marker from 1963. The watch officer pulled up the chart database. "There's no Coast Guard marker in that area. Never has been. You feeling okay?" I wasn't okay. My hands were still shaking and I felt cold, despite the warm night. "I'm fine, just tired. Going to get some coffee." In the galley, Mabel was preparing breakfast for the morning shift. She took one look at me and poured coffee without being asked. "You went out to it, didn't you, the buoy? How did you know?" "Because I did the same thing 3 nights ago. Took the workboat, went to investigate." She sat down across from me. "What did you see?" I told her about the chain rising from the depths, about something climbing it. She nodded slowly. "I saw that too. Didn't stick around to see what it was, but I did some research after." She pulled out her phone and showed me a search result. Marker 7 Delta was a real buoy. Coast Guard deployed it in 1963 to mark a hazard. Want to know what the hazard was? I wasn't sure I did, but I nodded. A sunken submarine. Soviet diesel boat that went down during the Cuban Missile Crisis. Never officially acknowledged by either government, but there are records. The submarine was shadowing a U.S. carrier group when it developed mechanical problems and sank. Went down in deep water, all hands lost. The Coast Guard put out a marker to warn ships away from the area because there were concerns about radiation from the reactor. Diesel boats don't have reactors. That's what the official record says. But there are other documents, declassified stuff, that suggest this particular boat was carrying something else. Some kind of experimental equipment, maybe a weapon. Whatever it was, they wanted people to stay away. She put her phone away. The marker buoy was removed in 1969. Official reason, the wreck had settled and was no longer a navigation hazard. Real reason, they didn't want anyone asking questions about what was down there. So, why are we seeing it now? Because it's still marking the hazard. Whatever went down out there, it's still there, still dangerous. She looked at me seriously. "You feel different after being out there. Cold, maybe? Disoriented?" "Yeah. How did you know?" "Because I felt the same way. Took 2 days to shake it. And during those 2 days, I kept having dreams. Same dream every time I closed my eyes. I was underwater, in complete darkness, and I could hear something moving around me. Something big, circling, getting closer." She shuddered. The dream stopped after the 2nd day, but I still think about it. Still wonder what would have happened if I'd stayed at that buoy, if I'd waited to see what was climbing that chain. I didn't sleep well for the next week. Every time I started to drift off, I'd jerk awake, feeling like I was sinking into dark water. When I did manage to sleep, I had the same dream Mabel described. Underwater, in darkness, something circling me. The buoy appeared every night at the same time, same location. Other crew members started noticing it, asking questions. The platform manager finally agreed to send an official report to the Coast Guard, requesting information about any navigation markers in our area. The response came back 3 days later. "No markers within 10 miles of our coordinates. No hazards noted. The area was clear and safe for all maritime operations." But the light kept appearing every night, 2 weeks after my first trip to the buoy, Cormac Beaudry, one of the helicopter pilots, mentioned seeing something strange during a supply run. He'd been flying back to shore at sunset when he noticed the buoy, but from the air he could see something else. A disturbance in the water around it, like something large was just below the surface, creating a circular pattern in the current. Looked like a whirlpool, he said, but slow, barely turning. And it was dark in the center, darker than the water around it, like something was absorbing light. Did you report it? Yeah, they sent a boat out the next day to investigate. Found nothing, just open water. He paused. But the crew said they felt sick while they were out there. Headaches, nausea, disorientation. Soon as they headed back to platform, symptoms stopped. That night, I stood on the helipad and watched the buoy light blinking in the distance. I'd been avoiding going back out there, but I couldn't stop thinking about it. About the chain rising from the depths, about whatever was climbing it. About the submarine that had gone down 50 years ago carrying something experimental. Mabel joined me. You're thinking about going back? No. Yes, you are, I can tell. She lit a cigarette. I think about it too. Every night I see that light, I think about taking the boat out there, finding out what's really down there. Why don't you? Because I'm not suicidal. Whatever is out there, it's been waiting for 50 years. It can wait longer. She blew smoke into the still air. But I'll tell you something. That buoy doesn't just appear randomly. I've been tracking it. It appears exactly at midnight every night for exactly 3 hours. Then it disappears at 3 a.m. like clockwork. 3 hours. Why 3 hours? That's what I've been trying to figure out. I looked up the records on that submarine. According to the declassified documents, it went down just after midnight. They estimate it took about 3 hours to reach the bottom, from the time it started sinking to the time it hit the seafloor. I felt cold despite the warm night. So, the buoy appears during the same time the submarine was sinking. Every night, marking the same event over and over. Like it's stuck in a loop, trying to warn people about something that already happened. She flicked her cigarette into the water below. I think whatever was on that submarine, whatever experimental thing they were carrying, it's still active down there, still doing whatever it was designed to do, and the buoy is trying to warn us to stay away. Then why can't our instruments detect it? Because it's not really here, not in our present. It's a memory or an echo, something bleeding through from the past. But just because it's not physically here doesn't mean it's not dangerous. You felt it when you went out there. The cold, the disorientation, the way distance stopped making sense. That's the effect reaching up from the bottom, from whatever is down there. The next night I decided to break the rules. I waited until midnight, until the buoy light appeared. Then I went to the control room and accessed the ROV system. We had a remote submersible for underwater inspections, capable of diving to the depths where the submarine would be resting. I'd operated it before during my training. I deployed the ROV and guided it southwest toward the coordinates where the buoy appeared. On the monitor, I could see the dark water passing by, occasionally a fish or jellyfish drifting through the lights. The depth gauge showed me descending, 500 feet, 1,000 feet, 2,000 feet. At 3,200 feet, the ROV's lights illuminated something. A shape on the seafloor, long and cylindrical. I moved closer, and the shape resolved into a submarine. It was resting on its side, the hull corroded and covered in marine growth, but still recognizable. Soviet markings were visible on the conning tower, faded but readable. The submarine was maybe 300 feet long, one of the larger diesel boats. But Mabel had been right. There were modifications to the hull that didn't match standard designs. A section amidships had been enlarged, like they'd cut the boat open and inserted additional compartments. I maneuvered the ROV around to the modified section and saw that the hull had been breached. Not from the sinking, but from something coming out from inside. The metal was bent outward, the edges sharp and deliberate, like something had cut through and pushed the hull open. The ROV's lights shone into the breach. Inside was darkness that seemed to absorb the light. I increased the light intensity, but it didn't help. The darkness inside that hull was absolute, impenetrable. And in that darkness, something moved. I saw it for just a second, a shape shifting in the black, too large to be anything that should fit inside a submarine. Then the ROV's camera went to static. I tried the controls but got no response. The ROV was still transmitting. I could see the depth gauge, the battery level, the compass heading, but the camera showed only static, and the submersible wasn't responding to my commands. Then the depth gauge started to change. The ROV was ascending, not from my controls but on its own, or being pulled up. I watched the gauge climb, 3,000 feet, 2,500 feet, 2,000 feet. The ROV was rising fast, too fast, like something was reeling it in. I tried to regain control, but nothing worked. The submersible was coming up whether I wanted it to or not. At 1,000 feet, the camera came back online. The image showed dark water, and wrapped around the ROV's frame, something that looked like cable or chain. But it was moving, pulsing, like it was alive. The ROV's mechanical arm had been torn off, and I could see scoring on the hull where something had tried to pry it open. At 500 feet, the thing around the ROV released it. The cable or chain or whatever it was withdrew into the depths below, and the ROV stabilized. I regained control and brought it back to the platform, my hands shaking on the controls. When we recovered the ROV, the damage was clear. Deep gouges in the hull, the arm completely torn away, and wrapped around one of the cameras was a piece of the cable I'd seen. Except it wasn't cable. It was organic, covered in a membrane that was slick and cold to the touch. When we tried to remove it, the thing disintegrated into a black liquid that smelled like deep ocean and something else, something chemical. We sent samples to the lab on shore. The analysis came back 3 days later with results that made no sense. The material was biological, but unlike anything in any database. Closest match was deep-sea organism tissue, but modified, altered at a molecular level by something that the lab techs couldn't identify. Radiation? I asked when I saw the report. No, chemical, but not any chemical we recognize. The molecular structure shows signs of deliberate engineering, but using principles that don't match current science. The technician who'd done the analysis looked troubled. Whatever this came from, it's been altered, changed into something that shouldn't exist in nature. I thought about the submarine, about the experimental equipment or weapon it had supposedly been carrying. About 50 years of that equipment sitting on the bottom, leaking whatever it contained into the ocean. About what that might have done to anything living down there. The buoy still appeared every night. But now I understood what it was marking. Not just a sunken submarine, but the results of whatever had gone wrong down there. Whatever experiment or weapon the Soviets had been carrying had survived the sinking, had been active for 5 decades, changing everything it touched. And something down there had been exposed to it. Something that was now climbing the marker chain every midnight trying to reach the surface. I finished my rotation and transferred off that platform. Didn't tell anyone the real reason, just said I wanted a change. Last I heard, the buoy still appears every night, still marks the same coordinates. The company has standing orders not to approach it, though they won't say why. But I know. And sometimes, late at night, when I'm working a different platform, I think about what's down there in the Gulf. what's been changing and growing for 50 years, feeding on whatever leaked from that submarine. What climbs the marker chain every midnight, getting a little higher each time. And I wonder what will happen when it finally reaches the surface. When whatever's down there completes its climb and emerges into our world. The buoy is warning us, has been warning us for 50 years. But warnings only work if someone listens. I listened, I stayed away. But there are always others who don't know, who see a blinking light and go to investigate, who get close to that chain and feel the cold spreading up from the depths, who have dreams of drowning in darkness while something circles them. The gulf is deep and dark and full of secrets. Most of them should stay buried, but some of them won't stay down no matter how deep you sink them. Some of them climb, some of them wait, and some of them are marked by lights that blink in the darkness, trying to warn away the curious and the brave and the foolish. I was all three once. Now I'm just someone who knows better. Someone who sees navigation lights in the distance and turns away. Someone who understands that not every mystery needs to be solved, not every light needs to be followed. The alarm wasn't supposed to go off until Thursday. That was the schedule. Evacuation drills every third Thursday at 1400 hours, regular as clockwork. We'd done dozens of them since I started working Platform Epsilon 6, and they were always the same. The siren would sound, we'd gather at our muster stations, count heads, review procedures, and be back to work within 30 minutes. But on Tuesday at 0347 hours, the siren started wailing. I woke up in my bunk with my heart already racing. That automatic panic response to the evacuation alarm that they train into you during orientation. The siren was loud enough to rattle the metal walls, that distinctive two-tone wail that meant drop everything and move to your assigned lifeboat station. I pulled on my coveralls and boots, grabbed my life jacket, and stepped into the corridor. The emergency lighting was on, bathing everything in red. Other workers were emerging from their quarters, looking as confused as I felt. Nobody spoke, just moved toward they. The muster stations like we'd been drilled to do. My name is Thad O'Rourke, and I'd been working North Sea platforms for 11 years. Long enough to know the difference between a drill and a real emergency. This felt wrong. The timing was off, and there hadn't been any announcement over the PA system. During drills, they always announced it first, told everyone it was just practice. Now there was just the siren, screaming into the early morning darkness. I reached my muster station at Lifeboat 3. Rowan St. Clair, our safety officer, was there with his clipboard, checking off names as people arrived. He looked tense, his jaw tight. "Is this a drill?" I asked him. "Don't know. No notification came through my office." He marked my name off. Could be a malfunction in the alarm system. "Have you tried the PA? Not responding. Radio's not working either." He looked at his clipboard. "We're missing people. Keegan Allery hasn't checked in, and neither have 3 others from the night shift." The siren cut off abruptly, leaving a ringing silence. We stood there in the red emergency lighting, waiting for an announcement that didn't come. After a minute, Rowan tried his radio again. "Control room, this is St. Clair. We have personnel at muster stations. What's the status?" "Static." He tried again. "Control room, please respond." Then the PA system crackled to life. But it wasn't the watch officer's voice that came through. It was a recording, the automated system message that played during drills. "All personnel are accounted for and secured. Repeat, all personnel are accounted for and secured. Evacuation drill complete." Rowan looked at his clipboard. "That's not right. We're missing 4 people." I looked around at the assembled crew. Maybe 20 of us at this muster station, all looking confused and uneasy. The other lifeboat stations would have similar numbers, but the platform held 42 people this rotation. If 4 were missing, they had to be somewhere. "I'll go check the control room," Rowan said. "Everyone stay here until we know what's happening." He left, moving quickly through the red-lit corridors. The rest of us waited, shifting uncomfortably, not talking much. Something about the situation felt wrong beyond just the timing. The air seemed colder than it should be, and there was a smell I couldn't quite identify. Like seawater, but with something else mixed in. Something chemical. I noticed water on the deck. Just a little bit, a thin film that caught the red light. I knelt down and touched it. Cold, much colder than it should be. And it was seawater. I could taste the salt when I touched my finger to my tongue. "We got a leak?" someone asked. "Shouldn't be water here. We're 3 levels above the water line." I stood up and looked around. The water seemed to be coming from under one of the doors, seeping out into the corridor. The door led to a storage room that should have been empty. I tried the handle. Locked. But I could hear something on the other side, a sound like dripping water, steady and rhythmic. And underneath it, something else. A voice, maybe, too muffled to make out words. "Keegan?" I called through the door. "You in there?" No response. Just that steady dripping and the muffled voice. I was about to go find Rowan when the PA system crackled again. This time, it was a different message, one I'd never heard before. "Flooding detected on lower decks. All personnel proceed to lifeboat stations immediately. This is not a drill." Everyone looked at each other. We were already at the lifeboat stations. And there shouldn't be any flooding. The sea state was calm. No storm. No reason for water to be breaching the hull. One of the other workers, a young guy named Patterson, pointed down the corridor. "Look at that." The emergency lights at the far end of the corridor were reflecting off something. Water, rising up from the deck below, spilling over the edge of the stairs. As we watched, it flowed toward us, that same cold seawater I'd found under the storage room door. "We need to get topside," someone said. We moved as a group toward the stairs leading up, away from the rising water. But when we reached them, we found more water coming down from above. Meeting us from both directions, flowing in a way that didn't make sense. Water doesn't flow upward, doesn't come from levels that are higher than the source. The PA crackled again. "All personnel are accounted for and secured. Repeat, all personnel are accounted for and secured." "We're not secured," Patterson said, his voice rising with panic. "We need to evacuate." I tried a door leading to an alternate route. Locked, tried another, also locked. All the doors that should have been open for emergency evacuation were sealed, and the water was still rising, now ankle-deep and numbingly cold. Rowan's voice came over the PA, but it sounded wrong, distorted. "Return to quarters. This is a false alarm. All personnel return to quarters immediately." That wasn't procedure. During an evacuation, real or drill, you never told people to return to quarters. You completed the drill or you evacuated. You didn't send people back. "Something's wrong," I said. "That's not Rowan, not really." "What do you mean, not really? It's his voice." "Listen to it. The cadence is off, and he's saying the wrong things." I looked at the rising water. We need to find another way up. We moved through the corridors, looking for stairs or ladders that would take us higher. The water kept following us, flowing in ways that violated basic physics. It came around corners before it should have, pooled in areas that were higher than its source, moved against the slight tilt of the platform. We found Rowan on the 3rd level, standing in the middle of a corridor, staring at a wall. He didn't respond when we called his name, just kept staring, his clipboard hanging forgotten in his hand. Rowan! I grabbed his shoulder and he turned slowly. His eyes were unfocused, looking through me rather than at me. They're all inside, he said quietly. All of them, safe and secure. What are you talking about? Who's inside? Everyone. All personnel accounted for. He pointed at the wall he'd been staring at. Can't you see them? I looked at the wall. It was just metal, standard platform construction. But as I looked closer, I saw something in the surface. Reflections, maybe, or shadows. They moved like people, like dozens of people crowded together. But there was nothing there to cast the reflections. Patterson pulled at my arm. We need to go. The water's still rising. He was right. The water was now knee-deep, and it was getting harder to move through. We left Rowan standing there and pushed on, looking for a way up to the main deck. The PA system continued its loop of contradictory messages. First, the evacuation order, then the all clear, then flooding warnings, then return to quarters. The voices changed. Sometimes it was Rowan, sometimes the automated system, sometimes voices I didn't recognize at all. We found a ladder leading up to the main deck and climbed it, pulling ourselves out of the water. At the top, we emerged onto the deck and stopped. The platform was wrong. The equipment looked different, older in some spots, newer in others. The paint was faded in places where it should have been fresh, and fresh where I knew it had been weathered. And there were people on the deck. Dozens of them, standing at the rails, looking out at the ocean. They wore coveralls like ours, but the styles were wrong, from different eras. Some looked like they were from the 80s, others from more recent years. They stood perfectly still, not moving, not talking, just staring out at the dark water. "Who are they?" Patterson whispered. I approached one of the figures, a man in old-style coveralls with a patch that showed a company logo I didn't recognize. "Excuse me," I said. He didn't respond, didn't even blink. I waved my hand in front of his face and got no reaction. It was like he was a statue, or a recording of a person rather than an actual person. Then I noticed their feet. Every single one of them was standing in water. Not the water that had been chasing us through the corridors, but seawater that seemed to be coming up through the deck itself, pooling around their boots and soaking the metal. The PA crackled. "Evacuation drill complete. All personnel may return to normal duties." But none of the figures moved. They just kept standing there, staring at the ocean, water rising around their feet. I heard footsteps behind me and turned to see Keegan Allery climbing up from a lower deck. He looked confused, soaked to the waist, his life jacket hanging loose around his shoulders. "Keegan, where have you been? We've been looking for you." I was in my quarters. Then the alarm went off, and when I opened my door, there was water everywhere. I tried to get to the muster station, but all the corridors were flooded. He looked around at the frozen figures on the deck. "What's going on? Who are these people?" "I don't know. They're not responding." Keegan walked up to one of the figures and reached out to touch it. His hand passed right through, like the person was a hologram. "They're not real. None of them are real." But they looked real. They cast shadows in the emergency lighting. Their clothes moved slightly in the wind. They were there, present, but not quite solid. Not quite in our reality. The PA system changed its message again. "This is the final evacuation. All personnel to lifeboats immediately. The platform is being abandoned." "We haven't abandoned this platform," Patterson said. "It's still operational." "Not this platform," Keegan said quietly. "Look." He pointed to the horizon. In the distance, I could see lights. Platform lights, but wrong somehow. Positioned where I knew there was nothing but open ocean. As I watched, the lights flickered and changed. Sometimes bright, sometimes dim, like I was seeing them at different times simultaneously. I think we're seeing other platforms, Keegan continued. Other installations that were here before, or will be here in the future. All of them overlapping with this one. That's impossible. Yeah, but look around. None of this is possible. Water flowing upward, people who aren't really there, messages from drills that never happened. He looked at the frozen figures. I think something went wrong with the evacuation system. Not the mechanical system, but something deeper. Time, space, I don't know. But when the alarm went off, it opened something. Made the platform exist in multiple times at once. The water was rising again, coming up through the deck plates, spilling over from the lower levels. The frozen figures didn't move, didn't react, even as the water reached their knees, their waists, their chests. We need to get to a lifeboat, I said. We ran to Lifeboat 3, our designated boat. But when we reached it, we found it was already occupied. People sat in the seats wearing life jackets, staring straight ahead. More frozen figures, more echoes of evacuations that had happened or would happen. Try another boat, Keegan said. We tried Lifeboat 1, same thing. Lifeboat 2, full of unmoving people. Every lifeboat on the platform was occupied by figures that weren't quite there, leaving no room for us. The PA crackled with a new voice, one that sounded very old, recorded on equipment from decades ago. Mayday, mayday, mayday. This is platform Epsilon 6. We are experiencing catastrophic failure. Requesting immediate evacuation. Multiple casualties. We are abandoning platform. Mayday, mayday, mayday. That message, Patterson said. I've heard about that. There was a platform disaster in the North Sea back in 1982. Platform Epsilon 6. It was the designation they used before they rebuilt and redesignated it. Structural failure, something about the legs giving way during a storm. 20 people died. This is Epsilon 6, I said. Yeah, the new one. Built on the same location in 1985. They kept the designation number but added different letters to distinguish it. He looked around at the water rising on the deck. What if the new platform is somehow connected to the old one? What if the evacuation system is linked to every Epsilon 6 that ever existed in this location? The water was chest deep now, and getting higher. The frozen figures were completely submerged, but they still stood there, still stared at nothing. I could see them under the water, perfectly preserved, like they were encased in glass. The emergency lights, Keegan said. Look at them. The red emergency lights were doing something strange. They were pulsing, but not in sync. Some pulsed fast, some slow, some seemed to be moving backward through their cycle. And in the light, I could see more figures appearing. People running, people struggling in water, people trying to reach lifeboats that were already gone. They were seeing different evacuations, different emergencies, all happening simultaneously. The original platform failure in 1982. A fire in 1994. A helicopter crash in 2003. Every disaster that had ever struck any platform at these coordinates, all playing out at once. And we were caught in the middle of it, experiencing all of them together. The PA system cycled through messages faster now, voices overlapping. All personnel accounted for. Catastrophic failure, return to quarters, abandoned platform, drill complete. Mayday, mayday, mayday. The water reached my neck. I had to tilt my head back to keep my mouth above the surface. Keegan and Patterson were doing the same, treading water, looking for anything that might help us. The helicopter pad, Keegan gasped. It's the highest point. Maybe the water won't reach it. We swam toward the stairs leading up to the helipad, fighting against the current that still moved in impossible directions. I grabbed the railing and pulled myself up, one step at a time. the water dragging at me like it wanted to pull me back down. At the helipad, we climbed out of the water and collapsed on the metal deck. From here, we could see the entire platform below us, completely flooded, the water now covering everything. The frozen figures were gone, submerged too deep to see. But I could feel them down there, still standing at their posts, still staring at the ocean, waiting for an evacuation that would never come. The emergency lights pulsed in their irregular rhythms, casting red shadows across the water. And in those shadows, I saw something moving. Not the frozen figures, but something else, something large, circling the platform legs, rising slowly from the depths. "What is that?" Patterson whispered. I didn't answer. I was watching the shape grow larger as it spiraled up from below. It wasn't quite solid, more like a darkness that was slightly darker than the water around it. But it was there, real enough to create ripples as it moved, real enough to make the platform shake slightly as it brushed against the legs. The PA crackled one more time. "Final message. To anyone who receives this. Platform Epsilon 6 is lost. All hands lost. If you are hearing this, you are in the same location. The platform exists in layers, all occupying the same space. Every disaster, every evacuation, they all loop forever. You cannot leave. You can only join the others. Wait for the next alarm. It always comes. It never stops coming." The voice faded into static, and the static faded into silence. The emergency lights stopped pulsing and held steady, and the water began to recede. We watched it drain away, flowing back down through the deck plates, disappearing into the lower levels. Within minutes, the platform was dry again, as if the flooding had never happened. The frozen figures reappeared as the water dropped, standing exactly where they had been, still staring at the ocean. "What just happened?" Patterson asked. "The evacuation cycle completed," Keegan said. "It ran through its loop, and now it's resetting." "Resetting for what?" Before anyone could answer, the siren started wailing again. That same two-tone evacuation alarm, cutting through the silence of the early morning. The emergency lights began to pulse, and the PA system crackled to life with the familiar message. "All personnel are accounted for and secured. Repeat, all personnel are accounted for and secured." "No," Patterson said. "No, we just did this. We can't do it again." But the water was already rising. I could see it seeping up through the deck plates, that same cold seawater beginning its impossible journey through the platform. "We need to get off this platform," I said. "The lifeboats are full of ghosts," Keegan finished. "Every escape route is blocked by people who tried to evacuate and never made it. We're trapped in the same loop they are." The siren continued to wail. The water continued to rise, and I realized that Patterson had disappeared. One moment he was standing next to me, the next he was gone. I looked over the edge of the helipad and saw him on the deck below, standing perfectly still, staring at the ocean. He'd become one of the frozen figures, locked into the evacuation loop, repeating it forever. "It's taking us," Keegan said. "One by one, it's adding us to the cycle. How do we stop it?" "I don't think we can. I think this is what happens at this location. Every platform built here fails eventually. Every evacuation traps more people in the loop. The original platform disaster in 1982 started it, and it's been growing ever since, collecting everyone who works here, adding them to the eternal drill." The water reached the helipad. We climbed onto the railing, the highest point we could reach. Below us, the platform was flooding again, the frozen figures standing in the rising water. The PA system cycling through its messages, the emergency lights pulsing their irregular rhythms. I looked at Keegan and saw that he was fading, not disappearing, but becoming translucent like the other figures. His eyes were losing focus, staring past me at something I couldn't see. "Keegan, stay with me. Don't let it take you." "Can't fight it," he said, his voice distant. "It's too strong. We're already part of it. Have been since the alarm went off." He looked at me with eyes that were already somewhere else. "See you next drill, Thad." Then he was gone, and I was alone on the railing, with the water rising around me and the siren wailing, and the PA system announcing that all personnel were accounted for. I don't know how long I held on. Time stopped meaning anything. The evacuation cycle ran again and again, water rising and falling, the siren starting and stopping, the messages playing on repeat. Sometimes it felt like minutes, sometimes like hours, sometimes like years. Eventually, I stopped fighting it. Let myself slip into the water, let the cold seep into my bones, let the evacuation drill run its course. When I climbed out onto the deck, I found myself standing with the others, the frozen figures who had been trapped here before me. I took my place at the rail and stared out at the ocean, waiting for the next alarm. It came at 0347 hours. It always comes at 0347 hours. The siren wails, the emergency lights pulse, the PA system announces that all personnel are accounted for. We go through the motions of evacuation, moving through corridors that flood in impossible ways, trying to reach lifeboats that are already full, climbing to the helipad only to watch new arrivals join us in the loop. I've seen Rowan join us, seen him standing at the rail, staring at nothing, his clipboard long forgotten. Seen other workers from other rotations, all of them trapped in the same eternal drill. Sometimes I see people I don't recognize, wearing coveralls from decades ago, evacuating from disasters that happened before I was born. We're all here, all accounted for, all secured in the evacuation that never ends. The platform is still operational, as far as the company knows. They send new crews every rotation, and those crews work their shifts and drill their drills. They don't know that some of them won't leave when the helicopter comes. Don't know that the evacuation alarm that goes off at 0347 hours every Tuesday isn't a malfunction or a drill. It's a collection, and it's always looking for more personnel to account for. I'm writing this during a brief moment of clarity before the next alarm sounds. If you're reading this, if you're working Platform Epsilon 6 or any platform at these coordinates, pay attention to the evacuation alarm. If it goes off at the wrong time, if the PA system gives contradictory messages, if you see water rising in impossible ways, don't try to evacuate. You're already trapped, we all are. All personnel are accounted for and secured. The siren is starting again. I can hear it building, that familiar two-tone wail that means drop everything and move to your muster station. The emergency lights are beginning to pulse. The water is seeping up through the deck plates. I need to take my place at the rail now. Need to stand with the others and stare at the ocean and wait for the next crew to join us.